No wounds upon my body, no scars that you can find. Just hurt from wars fought long ago, implanted in my mind. No outward signs of injury, no telltale signs of pain, only flashbacks and the nightmares time and time again. But all's not lost for us, old friend. There are those that understand. Let them lead us through the darkness, go with them hand in hand. This is a poem written from a former soldier who's battling PTSD. According to the Encyclopedia of Social Work, military social work has a rich history of providing services to military men and women and their families during periods of peace, conflict, and national crisis. Military social workers adhere to the NASW Code of Ethics while providing services to an institution with its own unique culture, standards, and values. But there are a lot of ethical issues that we face while working with military veterans. As social workers, we are trained to start where the client is. We can't assume that the client is back further in their recovery. We also can't assume that they're further along in their recovery. We have to start exactly where they are, and it might take a little time to figure out where this is. But nowadays, some social workers want the quick fix. They want to hurry up and try to help the client they are working with, but this doesn't always help the client. Sometimes it hurts them more than it helps them. According to Swales, he discussed the idea of soul repair as the ability to help a veteran from the inside out. His opinion is that soul repair best happens when helpers sit alongside the veteran in the midst of pain and anguish and bear hopeful witness to the journey ahead of transformation that may occur. When helpers jump too quickly to get answers, the focus can be on the social worker's journey and need for answers rather than the client itself. By talking about the pain that the veteran feels, the social worker can eventually bring the veteran to forgive himself and in turn possibly forgive others. By jumping straight to forgiveness, the social worker may dismiss the veteran's pain, and this could cause the veteran to believe that the social worker is more interested in quick resolutions and getting answers rather than helping the veteran and worrying about the veteran's pain. Since 9/11, 2 million military soldiers have been deployed to different areas. These areas consist of Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. The first or even the second deployment can be hard for this soldier, but studies show that the more deployment a soldier goes on, the worse the symptoms get from the deployment. These symptoms include, but are not limited to, stress, psychological and marital problems, and higher risks of using medication for combat stress. Psychological problems include PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, which could cause relationships with spouses and children to be impacted in a negative way. This causes an even bigger issue to arise when you bring family into the mix. After returning home, many veterans need help to handle their PTSD. They fall back on substance abuse, which could be an unlikely intake of alcohol, an increase in smoking, but there are also a rise in prescription drugs. Many services have been put into place by the Veterans Affairs Office, or the VA, to help veterans cope with the pain of deployment. The ASAP, which stands for Army Substance Abuse Programs, are programs set forth to help returning veterans cope with PTSD in healthier ways than substance abuse. The VA also set up TRICARE, and TRICARE is a veteran medical insurance program that covers substance abuse treatment services, but it doesn't cover all of them. TRICARE does not cover methadone treatment. Treatment might be available, but many veterans fear the stigma that goes along with substance abuse. A study from 2006 done about the National Guard and the help that they receive for these symptoms shows that only 13.3% of National Guard veterans receive services from a counseling profession and only 1% get counseling because of substance abuse. The same study showed that these low numbers are due to the fact that the healthcare coverage and access following military deployment, living in a remote area, unfamiliarity with veteran healthcare systems, and civilian employment conflicts. There are many other challenges that go along with ethical issues. Challenges appear in every job, and it is our job as social workers to fight past these conflicts and not judge. We have to look past stereotypes and see that not all veterans are the same. Just because something works for one veteran and one veteran is one way, does not mean that every veteran is that way. Just because a war veteran does not mean that they abuse their wives. In a recent study, it was found that the evidence regarding the relationship between military culture and issues such as domestic violence were inconclusive. Therefore, being a veteran does not mean that someone is more likely to abuse their spouse than not being a veteran. That being said, this does not fit all veterans because, like I said before, not everybody is the same. While some veterans do not show increased anger when returning home from a deployment, some studies have shown that there are veterans that do return home with increased anger. There is a growing research on partner violence in veterans that suffer from PTSD along with other mental issues. These surveys look at different aspects, not just deployment. They look at deployment, how happy the veteran is in their relationship before and after deployment, and they also look at how they interact with others. Others could mean other veterans, civilians, or their families. Families of veterans are also affected by PTSD and war. Children of veterans' experiences may be similar to veterans, especially if the in-home parent is also stressed. A lot of times when a veteran returns home with PTSD, the people close to them experience their own forms of PTSD. The spouse could become stressed, isolated, and the children could face a lot of issues. Children of deployed service members have been found to experience outcomes as a result of parental deployment, including experiences increasing psychological difficulties, anxiety, school and peer difficulties, substance abuse of their own, and depressive symptoms which could lead to suicidal ideals. The social worker needs to know how to work with veterans, but also how to work with their families too. Therefore, my call to action is that we make society more aware of what veterans go through. There are a lot of people that hold stigma, and they don't understand what a veteran goes through and how just because they return home does not mean that they're going to go right back to how they were before they left. Society needs to know all of these. Just because they come home does not mean they fully come home. Their minds and their souls are still on deployment, and we need to understand that. They still live the experiences every day. They battle nightmares seeing what they saw over there, whether they were impacted by it, whether they saw it, whether they were involved in it, or whether somebody just told them about it and they have a great imagination. The slightest pot falling on the ground might just sound like a medal to us. But that pot hitting the floor in the kitchen could be an IED going off, or an RPG hitting their convoy. To them, it's not just a pot hitting the floor. My father struggled with PTSD. When he came home, we couldn't play video games. We couldn't shut doors loudly. We couldn't drop anything in the house without him spiraling, getting really anxious and sometimes even violent. By spreading awareness on the many resources available to veterans, we can help veterans get more help for their PTSD. We need to inform veterans that there are a lot of things out there that can help them. Even though TRICARE does not cover everything, we can still tell veterans about TRICARE to help them get counseling and help with their substance abuse. They don't need to worry about other military counselors judging them, because judgment is irrelevant. So we need to stop the stigma on veterans and PTSD. Just because a veteran has PTSD doesn't mean that they abuse their wives. Just because they have PTSD doesn't mean that they're violent. We need to stop stigma. Along with that, just because someone is a veteran does not mean that they'll become an alcoholic or abuse drugs. By putting all judgment aside, stopping the stigma, and spreading awareness and education to resources to not only the veterans but also the community, society can better help the men and women that are out there putting their lives on the line for us. My name's Lori Engel, and this is my PowerPoint on veterans. Stop the stigma.